The Center for Creative Leadership is that the future is actually quite bright, quite complex. At the same time, those leaders that are able to navigate the complex challenges will have significant opportunities. Specific to India, we had a historic drop in GDP growth. That's just a pause, because what's going to happen in the next 5 years is going to be extended growth not only within India but across the world. So for what I would say leaders from India, notice I didn't say leaders in India, but leaders from India, there's going to be a significant opportunity. So to expand a little bit on what I mean by the difference between leading in India or from India. Historically, I think a lot of Western models have matriculated, if you will, into India, giving perspectives that Indian leaders should be like this, be like that. That took a little bit of energy, but at the same time, maybe wasn't the best approach. One of the interesting things that we found as we've studied rising and emerging and accelerating economies around the world, is that by looking at unique attributes, competencies, and capabilities needed from each country, you're able to identify, if you will, a framework that not only honors maybe some of the global knowledge about best practices in leadership, but actually puts leaders from a particular place in a unique position to succeed. Look at the growth in India, look at the expansion, look at the acquisitions of companies around the world. The challenge is not just how do I lead in India, but how do I, as an Indian leader, lead in Indonesia or in Canada? Those become really wonderful opportunities and unique chances to, if you will, practice leadership skills, and more importantly, live behaviors that will lead and guide people to the future. So when we talk about the leadership skills required for what I call C-level leaders, that mean CEOs, C-1, C-2, and we look at them across the globe, there are some key things that come to play. One is the ability to be a boundary spanner. Another would be the ability to be resilient. Another would be the ability to not just lead high-performance teams, but lead individuals who can lead high-performance teams. One of the things that I would share with you that we found around the world, and one of the most significant competencies for the future for senior leaders, is their ability to develop people. Right now, a lot of people talk about learning agility of leaders, and that's an individual process. We know that the ability of a leader to develop other people is going to be one of the most significant implications for leaders to expand the success of their organization. Now, how do those play out in India? Well, I think most of those things that I just mentioned still apply. But what we found is while Indian leaders are very resilient, they're also very stretched. In some of our own work with Indian leaders in our research and our surveys, we asked the question on, well, what's one of the things that would cause you to walk away from your position? And actually the answer was around life balance and some of the choices that they've had to make to get to the level where they are. So the ability not only to manage multiple priorities, but to also be resilient, and what comes with resilience. The other thing is, just like many cultures, not only organizational cultures, but regional cultures, there's a certain hierarchy that's honored and respected. We believe that should continue. However, oftentimes it manifests itself in organizations in places where maybe decision-making is hampered or innovation is slowed down because of over-reliant on a structure or one person. We know that the ability for these leaders not just to delegate, but to empower others is going to be critical for the success in India. Another thing is, and this is not unique of Indian leaders, but any leader that go to a different location and lead either in a different culture or a different company need to be more flexible in their approach and behavior. So just like a yoga expert knows that an individual who will embrace flexing and stretching, leaders need to be more pliable and flexible. And so there isn't just one way to get things done. And many Indian leaders come up in a structure, many are engineers, and they see a process for success. And what we would encourage Indian leaders to do, and some of the most successful ones, are those that are very flexible in their approach and look to others for leadership. You know, so interesting that we'll talk about India specifically, as we say that there is a short supply of what we would say next generation CEOs and C-level executives. And you say, well, why is that? Well, a mature group has gone on, but what has happened is many of those individuals were what we would call a heroic leader. They either worked harder, or they were smarter, or they had better networks or connectivity. What we find is that next generation coming up doesn't necessarily have all of those components, or frankly, those components are the things that may get them there but won't get the organization to the next level. And so what we would say is that those individuals need to recalibrate. Many of the individuals who come through our most senior programs are clearly at a point in their career where they're successful, they've had P&L responsibility, they've had tremendous acknowledgement of their success, but they're potentially bogged down, if you will, in their ability to create large-scale transformation. The thing that's most important to realize is that a single heroic leader can only do so much. And frankly, a heroic individual within an organization will not create a sustainable entity over time. The goal of the leader in the future, the most senior leader, should be developing the next generation now. I guess one of the things that we look at is, do we want to create heroic organizations, or do we want to create sustainable organizations? And I would say that in India, you want sustainable organizations that do heroic things, that make a difference not only in local communities, but in the lives of other people and around the world. And that requires what I would call leaders who, yes, can get things done, that have those heroic qualities, but frankly know how to transfer those qualities to others. When we do our best practice studies around the world, we actually look to see that those CEOs that we would consider best practice are spending 30 to 40% of their time with talent at various levels. And so as you look at your organization, if your senior leader is spending less than 10%, then potentially that's an indication of an organization that may not be sustainable past the succession of the current or sitting CEO. And so what we look at is, what we encourage you to look at is not only creating a pool, creating a talent pipeline, a pool, has been around for a while, but what we want you to do is create the conditions whereby humans flourish. By making sure that you have the right culture in the organization and the right leadership, that will drive sustainability. As we look at organizations and how they need to evolve, we actually focus our energy on organizations that are transforming or have transformed their culture. And one of the things that we find is they look at actually three areas, and they look at what we would call these pillars of transformation. One is around strategy, the second is around talent or the people, and the third is around culture. And so we actually advocate methodology where an organization looks at all of those three. We also kind of redefine leadership in a way that we say a leader during these complex times is able to drive what we would say direction, alignment, and commitment, or DAC. So if there are 6 things to remember, you'd say transformation requires an organization to be excellent at strategy, at talent, and at culture, and assessing and diagnosing and baselining where they are in each of those areas. But in addition, then engage in organizational, individual, and societal activities that drive what we call direction, alignment, and commitment. What it means is creating what we would call a leadership strategy to match your business strategy. Many organizations have a clear business strategy, and then they worry about execution, and they leave something out along the way. What we encourage organizations to do is commit and focus on creating a leadership strategy that is connected to the business strategy to drive business results for the future. So when we talk about alignment and what are the tools that help that, well, I think we need to step back and look at a perspective. And what we know about leadership is leadership starts first with awareness. From an individual leader standpoint, it's how I can become more self-aware. From a leader of a group, it becomes how do I become more aware of the alignment or the ability of my group. From an organizational or enterprise standpoint is, how am I more aware of what we are doing? Well, we believe and know for a fact, frankly, that feedback drives results. Now, feedback doesn't just drive results alone, but feedback coupled with metrics and accountability are the combination. So what are the tools? From an individual standpoint, we could say there are a lot of multi-rater assessments, 360s, there are psychological tools, team assessments, emotional intelligence tools. All of those are important, but we would say that feedback from those that you work with, that work for you, that you work for, is critical to your success, and then what you do with that. What we would say is asking the right questions, but more importantly, when we study leaders and watch them in practice, they spend about 80% of their time telling or prescribing. And what we would say, you need to flip that percentage and spend 80% of your time listening. So there's some very simple techniques and tactics. There's also some complex diagnostics. One of the most significant things an organization can do right now, given now the technology, is yes, do an organizational climate survey, an engagement survey, but there are more sophisticated tools available now. The ability to leverage social networking and network mapping concepts is a way to really capture a baseline of the relationships within an organization, between individuals in an organization. So one of the things I would say looking forward to the future is really looking how to use networking, network concepts, and network technology to map key relationships and actually map how you transfer knowledge. A lot of organizations have so much data, a lot of information. Some organizations convert that to knowledge. Very few can convert that to wisdom. And wisdom is not a platform. It's about people and how they relate to each other. We know, if you get really simple about things, why do people leave organizations? We know it's because of a feeling of indifference from my supervisor, or because I don't have a friend at work. So after all is said and done, let's create the conditions whereby humans flourish. And oftentimes those start with the leader in the behaviors that they manifest from what I would call more of an emotional intelligence space than a tactical intelligence.